Hello students, welcome to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. Today we are going to talk as part of demand analysis chapter, the demand schedule and demand curve. What is demand schedule? The demand schedule shows the relationship between the quantity demanded at each price, right? Show a demand schedule that there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. What is the relationship between the price and demand? We have been talking about, right? Whenever price increases, demand decreases. When the price decreases, demand increases. So this is called negative relationships. So the demand schedule will try to show us that how these demand schedules are given. So if you see this demand schedule and demand curve in the graphically, that each price at each commodity, different individuals, an individual, what quantity they are buying. Particularly they have taken ice cream an example, that the quantity demanded at each price, the demand curve which graphs the demand schedules illustrates that how the quantity demand of the good changes as its price varies, because a lower price increases the quantity demand, the demand curve slopes the downward, right. If you see in the graph, from when the price of we have 3 in the graphical, the quantity demanded, right. So you can see that it is the 2 and price has declined to 250. It has from 250 to 2 and 2 to 150, 150 to 1 and 50. So it's, you can see very clearly that a demand graph is slope. When you intersect all these dots, the points which you are seen, the demand curve is in the downward sloping. So the demand schedule is very given clearly that at given a prices, how people are bought, how many cones of ice creams they bought it, how the quantity has spread, which has very clearly reflected in the demand schedule as well as in the demand curve. So now here there will be two kinds of demand schedules, market demand versus individual demand. So what is that individual demand? So any individual who wants to buy, who wants to use at individual any kind of goods and services which they buy, you call it as a individual demand. But whereas market demand, when you sum of all the individual demands for a particular good or a service, you call it as a market demand. So here if you see that individuals as combined two, like Catherine, Nicholas, where the two put together market has come. So in the graphical representation we are taking the quantity demanded in market is the sum of the quantity demanded by all the buyers at each price. Thus the market demand curve is found by adding horizontally the individual demand curve. At price of $2, the Catherine demands 4 ice cream cones and Nicholas demands 3 ice creams cones. So the quantity demanded in the market at the price of 7 cones. So you can see clearly that a different kinds of market demand as sum of individual demands, when you combine, you could see more or less, like if you see the Catherine's demand is maybe relatively more than the Nicholas, but when you put together the market demand, the slope of the curve has not been changed. This will remain same in the market demand curve, but it is trying to give an aggregate picture of it, right. And this is about individuals and market demand curves. When will be shifts in the demand curve? Is it a demand curve will shift to the new curve? So it need not to be stable over time, because demands will not stable. It can change, it can increase or it can decrease. Demand due to the change in the factor other than the price is called change in demand. Like we said, income might change or taste and preference might change. So there can be some reasons to which can cause to change in the demand curve. That time you may find new demand curve will emerge. Change in demand leads to shift in the demand curve to the right or the left. So whenever it increases the demand, it shifts towards the right. Whenever demand decreases, it shifts towards the left. So you can see that means the new size of commodities where earlier you have quantity as from original DD. If you see in the graph 1, D2, D1, the quantity of demanded is increased. Earlier where you are demanded only 10 kgs, that is now become demanded to the 30 kgs. That is where the increase in demand has shifted demand curve to new in the right side. So whenever the demand has decreased from 30 to 10, the demand curve, the original demand curve is DD to D, and it has moved to the D1 curve. So that is where whenever change in the demand, it can move. So now let's understand the extension and contraction of demand curves. Extension is downward movement along the demand curve, which indicates that higher quantity is demanded for given fall in price of demand. Right? Extension is what you say, the extension of demand curve is a downward movement along with the demand curve, which indicates that higher quantity is demanded for given fall in price of good. Contraction, when you see, contraction is in a upward movement along the demand curve, which indicates that the lower quantity has demand for given increase in the price of the good. This also which can be clearly seen in the graph, how the extension of demand curve and how contraction of the demand curves has been drawn. So both also again it is a downward sloping, but you could see how the contraction and extension has been done. Now we say that whenever there is an abnormal demand, I mean as demand increases, price increases. When the demand falls, when the price falls, demand increases. When price increases, demand falls. So but are there any exemptions to the law of demand? Every commodity will have in a similar, when price increases, demand will decrease? No. So this was certain exemptions to law of demand was introduced by Sir Robert Giffen. So particularly during the war situation, depression, when economy is in the depression situation, Giffen paradox, demonstration effect and Veblen goods. I will briefly talk about this each. Whenever economy is in experiencing war, whether price is high or more, people will be striving for survival. So they will buy for their own survival, so that can be done. Depression time also, economy is in the very deep stress. So people would minimum for survival purpose, they would purchase their essential commodities without looking at the price. Giffen paradox. Here this Giffen says that poor people who uses certain goods and services, or they continue to consume, they may reduce the consumption of other, but the essential commodities, essential goods, they consume it. So hence even any circumstances on the poor people commodities, it will not be affected. Price increases also, they tend to buy. Even certain times given goods will be more bought when price of other, even if you see the commodity prices increases to survival. That is where they said this is a Giffen paradox. Demonstration effect also, similarly whenever other people own it, wear it, people see and buy certain products. So this demonstration effect also will not hold law of demand. Finally, the Veblen goods are the rich people who uses the commodities. They tend to buy more of when prices goes up, like a diamonds or anything, because it's become a status symbol. So people tend to buy as price increases. That is where we said these are the exemptions of Veblen goods, also exemption of law of demand. So, overall in this part of the lesson what we learned is the demand schedule, individual demand, market schedule, as well as the extraction and extension and contraction of demand, and the exemptions to the law of demand was the major take home point for this part of the lesson. Thank you.